Ian Stevens, thank you very much for coming along today to talk to us about your practice of audio feedback. So can we start perhaps with you telling us what it is that you are actually doing?
What I do is provide the students via the iLearn site with a audio file, usually an MP3 file, of their feedback for their assignment. So they get me going through their assignment part by part and giving them feedback on all areas of their assignment, so rather than written or typewritten feedback. So how that happens is firstly, I ask the students to provide their assignments in electronic form only via the iLearn site. So it goes through the relevant Turnitin process and it comes up in Grade Centre, needs marking section. That file I request the students to name just by their student identification number. And that way I can do the blind marking, and also provides me with discrete files. I then download those files off iLearn and put them onto usually a clean USB, and therefore I have all their files on a USB that I can take anywhere with me. I sit down and basically mark off my laptop on my iPad. So it's an easy system. Initially I was using a electronic digital dictaphone like this one. That was a little problematic in that there was a requirement to change chords around and download files, etc. After a bit of hit and miss and a bit of inquiry, I'm now using a program called RecordPad by NCH Software. It costs about $40 to download off the net, and allows me to read the assignment as well as dictate and give feedback at the same time. So I use a headset with a microphone and then basically go through and just dictate as I go through using the software. So then I end up with a file, which with the NCH software, the RecordPad software, I can name. So what I do is I name that again, cut and paste the student's identification number, and then I dump that into the USB stick under a folder which is feedback. So I have a folder which is assignments, a folder which is feedback, and eventually I'll end up with two depositories of files. So I have a feedback file. What happens then is I upload those feedback MP3 files back up to iLearn into the Grade Centre. So when the student gets access to their grade, they also have access to the feedback file, and only they have access to their feedback file. That seems to be positive. It gives me a bit of opportunity to discuss issues, and then the student can access those anytime.
Okay, Ian, can you walk us through the process of actually marking an individual assignment? How do you provide the audio feedback to the student?
Okay, so I've got the file sitting on a USB stick. Put it into your laptop, open the Word document, and then also open the NCH RecordPad software and basically set up your file, and then you just dictate like you dictate in an office environment. Usually the assignment projects that I set for the two subjects I'm teaching at the moment, being remedies and PPT, are both the same in that they are a letter of advice and a memo to partner. So in that regard, I usually go through and firstly detail the structure of the assignment, talk about structure, talk about white space, all those margins and all those bits and pieces, and grammar, and then I go back and look at the legal background or the legal structure of their assignment. So it gives me the opportunity to be somewhat expansive, which you can't be when you're writing feedback, or it's very time consuming when you're writing feedback. So once I've done that, I then stop the recording, mark up the file with a feedback file number, which is exactly the same as their SID, download that back to the USB, and then after I've finished all that, I can then upload those feedbacks onto iLearn into the Grade Centre in the needs marking area. And then when the student, again as I said before, as the student downloads their mark or the marks become available to the student, I make the recordings available, and they can look at at their recording at their leisure.
And what made you decide to start providing feedback in this way instead of the old-fashioned way?
I found the old-fashioned way a bit laborious. My writing can't be read by too many people. Probably just about me these days. And I was getting about my feedback from my students saying, you know, like your feedback, but I wish I could read it. So I was spending a lot of time going through with students with my feedback. I felt I couldn't be expansive enough in my feedback, and so I was trying to find a way of doing this, and I was also noting that, you know, when you hand back the hard copy assignments, over half of them are usually left in the box, so people aren't going to even read the feedback. So I approached a couple of cohorts in a semester about 3 years ago, and said, okay, what do you guys want from feedback? They said, well, we want, you know, the stuff that we get is too short and sharp and to the point. We'd like some in-depth feedback as to, you know, the structure, etc., etc. So after a bit of playing and, you know, going back to my days in commercial practice, basically, okay, why not dictate it? And then looked at, okay, well, you can use a digital dictator as I showed you before. And that kind of evolved into using software programs such as the NCH record pad, and I'm sure there's others out there. And that has got a really good reaction. Again, I did a kind of review after I started doing it, and it's got a very good reaction from the students. And I don't get as many, you know, shall we say, consults to try to get the feedback, and they've come back to me with great positive feedback on my feedback.
What do you think the advantages are of audio feedback for you as the instructor and for the students?
For me, as I said before, I request my students only to give me electronic copies of their work, so we haven't got paper copies hanging about. For me, it's the ability to basically mark anywhere I want to mark. So as long as I've got my USB stick, my headset with my microphone, and a computer or an iPad, I can mark the assignment. I don't need to type comments. I can just sit back in bed late at night, or in the lounge room, or, you know, on a beach somewhere, and basically mark assignments. So all I need is a USB stick and a computer, and away I go. I think that's much easier for me. It makes me a lot more mobile. Don't have to lug assignments everywhere. For the students, I think you have the ability of being more expansive and in-depth in their feedback, especially I find with my civil remedies students, who are basically semester 2 or 3 early in their careers, or early in their paths through uni. They are kind of voracious in trying to get feedback as to how to improve what they do. And I think this allows us to be more expansive and more in-depth in our feedback. The file itself, you know, marking an assignment, probably in the feedback I give, probably takes about 5 to 6 minutes of recording time. Okay. What I usually do is quickly scan the assignment, read through it quickly, get a feel for it, and then go back over it and start giving the feedback the second read through. So I don't think, time-wise, I don't think it takes any more time. There might be a little bit more time in the uploading, etc., but otherwise I think the quality of feedback is much better.
Okay, and do you think there are any disadvantages to using audio feedback?
Oh, the usual electronic problems. I know early on I lost a couple of files, which was a bit of a pain. But other than that, as long as you do the backups and things, which I now do, I can't see a negative at all. While some people like to have a hard copy to read, I think if you can get over that issue and are happy to mark on screen, I can't see a negative at all.
Okay, and would you recommend this to your colleagues?
I certainly recommend it. There is an opportunity, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Lauren yet, but there is a facility, I believe, in iLearn, which we may have to look at a bit closer, so we get the right person to look at that. I found it a little bit cumbersome, but it may have improved in the new version. It's all there ready to go if that's the case. Otherwise, as I said, the software I'm using, I'm sure there's others out there, is very easy to use and very user-friendly.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ian Stevens.
Thanks, Nick.